Welcome to Midnight Confessions. You found us. Real people. Real stories. The kind that make you check your locks twice. These aren't fake ghost stories. They're confessions from people who saw something they shouldn't have. Heard footsteps in empty houses. Woke up with bruises they can't explain. Still here? Each story gets darker. The woman who found handprints on her ceiling. The guy whose reflection moved first. The kid who drew the man in his closet before anyone mentioned the murder. Which one will mess you up the most? Subscribe before something finds you first. New confessions every week. Don't watch alone. Let's start the story. What I'm about to share with you will challenge everything you think you know about reality. These aren't just stories, they're documented experiences that left our family questioning the very nature of our world. If you're interested in real paranormal encounters, mysterious disappearances, and unexplained phenomena, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell because this channel brings you authentic supernatural experiences from ordinary people living extraordinary situations. Several weeks ago, something happened that still gives me chills. My spouse and I had a minor disagreement. Nothing serious, just one of those everyday marital moments. Instead of taking her usual walk down our street, she decided to venture into the dense woodland behind our property to clear her thoughts. I was relaxing on our back deck when I spotted her heading toward our makeshift shooting range area. When I called out asking about her destination, she mentioned needing space to calm down. Now, here's where things get absolutely mind-bending. Living in rural areas, you learn that forests aren't silent places. Every footstep, every broken branch, every movement creates sound. But after she disappeared into those trees, complete silence fell like a heavy blanket. I called her name repeatedly, nothing. No response, no rustling leaves, no snapping twigs. It was as if the entire forest had swallowed every sound. The children were inside alone, so I couldn't venture too far. But standing just 30 feet from where she'd entered, I should have heard something. The impossibility of her complete silence worried me deeply. After an hour and 20 minutes of this eerie quiet, she finally emerged. Here's where this story becomes truly unexplainable. She insisted she'd only been gone 10 to 15 minutes. When I showed her my phone's timestamp, she looked at me like I'd lost my sanity. But the most disturbing part? She claimed to have gotten lost in an area where our house remains clearly visible. She described feeling disoriented, as if something was guiding her movements, and mentioned the air feeling different, heavier, somehow wrong. Fast forward to June 24, 2024. Paranormal activity in rural areas often involves children, who seem more sensitive to supernatural presences. My 3-year-old son was playing on our back patio when every dog on our property suddenly erupted into frantic barking. Our normally calm dog Duke came bolting through the door like he'd seen death itself. My little boy started pointing toward the tree line, repeatedly saying, "Werewolf, Daddy, werewolf." Now, toddlers love monster videos, so normally I dismiss this as imagination. But his facial expression told a different story, pure terror mixed with confusion. Combined with the animal's reaction, I knew he'd witnessed something genuine. I grabbed my phone and started recording, hoping to capture evidence of whatever was lurking in those shadows. Through the video, you can hear massive movements in the underbrush, something far too large to be typical wildlife. The audio alone is enough to make your skin crawl. By July 9, 2022, the activity had escalated beyond outdoor sightings. My niece, who'd been staying with us, reached her breaking point. What started as minor disturbances became focused harassment that targeted her specifically. She'd been experiencing classic paranormal phenomena, unexplained sounds outside her bedroom window, feelings of being watched, and the sensation of an invisible presence standing directly behind her. These weren't random occurrences, they followed a pattern that suggested intelligent, purposeful interaction. The final incident pushed her over the edge. Around 3 a.m., while watching videos on her phone, she experienced what paranormal investigators call entity manifestation. She described feeling an overwhelming sense of malevolence, not just being watched, but being studied by something that wanted to cause harm. When she turned around, she witnessed a shadow figure disappearing into the wall within the blink of an eye. This wasn't a trick of light or sleep deprivation, she was fully awake and alert. The entity's presence was so intense, so threatening, that it left her feeling physically drained and emotionally terrorized. What makes these experiences particularly significant is their location. Rural paranormal activity often goes unreported because isolated families worry about credibility. But I've discovered others in our area, including a man in Georgia, who've witnessed identical phenomena. We've documented mysterious explosions that shake our entire house, unexplained disappearances of objects that reappear months later in identical locations, and ongoing supernatural encounters that seem to be escalating rather than diminishing. For skeptics watching this, I understand your doubt. That's why we're working with local paranormal investigators to document everything properly. We've commissioned an artist to create accurate representations of what we witnessed, and we're planning return visits to the forest location with proper recording equipment. This isn't about gaining internet fame or creating fictional content for entertainment. These are real experiences affecting a real family, and we're committed to finding answers. Whether you believe in supernatural phenomena or not, the evidence we're collecting speaks for itself. I'm sharing these experiences because isolation only makes paranormal encounters more frightening. If you've had similar experiences, especially in rural areas, please share them in the comments below. Creating a community of people who faced unexplained phenomena helps everyone involved feel less alone and more validated. We plan to provide weekly updates as our investigation continues. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications enabled because paranormal documentation often reveals patterns that only become clear over time. Your engagement and support help us maintain the resources necessary for proper investigation and evidence collection. Remember, the unexplained doesn't become less real just because we can't immediately understand it. Sometimes the most important discoveries come from ordinary people brave enough to share extraordinary experiences. What do you think happened during that missing hour in the forest? Have you ever experienced time distortion or unexplained disappearances? Share your own paranormal encounters in the comments, and let's build a community of people seeking answers to life's most mysterious questions. Don't forget to like this video if you found it compelling, subscribe for more real paranormal documentation, and ring that notification bell so you never miss our updates from this ongoing supernatural investigation. Let's start the story. My companion wondered if we could use the outdoor hot tub behind our property. I mentioned it was disconnected and heating costs were beyond our budget when we approached it together. Opening the cover to inspect inside left me absolutely stunned. Surprisingly, the system was running perfectly and the water appeared pristine, needing only minor maintenance work. While walking the perimeter, a thunderous crash echoed behind me. Imagine a massive tree trunk or enormous stone slamming into earth, similar to a car engine dropping 20 feet onto soft ground. The sudden noise startled me as I spun around, but thick vegetation blocked my view completely. I continued assisting with the spa maintenance work. She mentioned going inside to grab a change of clothes for soaking. Looking around, I noticed darkness approaching rapidly and felt uncomfortable remaining outside alone. Bending down to clean the filtration system, I heard what resembled something large crushing through branches and rushing toward my location. This made me leap up and sprint toward the rear entrance. Turning back to identify the source revealed absolutely nothing visible. I retreated indoors and climbed the staircase. I informed her about the strange sounds outside, and she studied my expression momentarily before responding that she wanted to unwind and relax anyway. She requested keeping the back patio door unlocked so she could call for help if needed. According to her account, she enjoyed the hot tub experience without any problems. Daily observations showed her increasing nervousness and reluctance to discuss recent events. She claimed nightly occurrences were happening when I pressed for details, but she consistently refused to elaborate further. Several evenings later, I stepped onto the porch and noticed the complete absence of natural sounds again. I invited her to join me outside, but she declined, saying exhaustion was setting in and she needed to contact her boyfriend before sleeping. My spouse handles early morning duties with our children while I manage overnight responsibilities, so she was already resting. At this moment, I realized I lacked courage to investigate alone, so I selected a film and settled into my reclining chair. Eventually drifting off, I awakened at 3 a.m. to sounds emanating from my niece's bedroom. A deep voice-like sound prompted me to knock on her door and call out repeatedly, receiving no response whatsoever. I assumed it must be video content and chose not to disturb her further. Heading toward my bedroom, just as sleep was approaching, another loud impact occurred. I awakened to hear what sounded like something scrambling along the exterior wall outside my bedroom window, understanding this location was extremely high up and physically impossible to reach. Looking through the glass revealed nothing visible. After investigating these loud sounds multiple times throughout the past year without discovering anything, I decided to dismiss it and return to sleep. The following morning, my niece emerged and described experiencing the shadow entity presence again, except this time she kept her lights illuminated. She explained waking up with that familiar unsettling feeling again. Upon opening her eyes, she witnessed an extraordinarily tall, dark silhouette standing directly above her bed. She said it was moving closer toward her, and just as facial features were becoming visible, she turned away in terror, but nothing remained when she looked back. She mentioned the eyes were particularly disturbing, but refused to provide additional details. The next morning, for the first time ever, my niece was awake bright and early. I noticed her anxious appearance as she informed me about departing for the 4th of July holiday weekend, returning the following Tuesday. When I asked about her well-being, she confirmed everything was fine and quickly exited. Later that day, my sister called informing me of my niece's decision not to return. I inquired about any problems, and she claimed everything was acceptable. She simply wanted to enjoy her remaining summer vacation. Shortly afterward, my niece called directly, explaining she no longer wanted to work at our location because she couldn't manage the anxiety caused by whatever presence existed there. She wouldn't elaborate beyond stating that whatever was happening in her room had left her completely terrified. Inspecting her room, I discovered she had been sleeping with one window completely open. This particular window was easily accessible from outside. I couldn't determine what had been affecting her, but whatever it was appeared capable of entering her room. Fast forwarding to Independence Day, I organized fireworks at the front of our property near the roadway facing the forest. Due to recent nighttime events, I decided to complete them before darkness arrived. We finished our celebration and brought everyone inside as twilight approached. After several hours, I remembered my garden hose remained scattered across the road. I ventured outside to clean up and properly store the equipment. During this task, I noticed complete silence again, except for distant fireworks sounds from neighboring celebrations. The hair on my neck stood up as I felt eyes watching me once again. I quickly coiled the hose and rushed back inside. I began questioning whether my imagination was creating these experiences. At this point, one day when I woke up late may have preserved my life. I've shared this story on various platforms using different accounts previously, but it deserves retelling. During elementary school, probably 3rd or 4th grade, my mother woke me urgently after oversleeping herself. Since she typically woke me each morning, this meant I had also overslept, making it impossible to prepare for school early enough to catch our bus. My school bus departed at 8 a.m. with pickup at 7 a.m., and it was already approximately 6:40. I remained in pajamas without eating breakfast yet. Mom decided to let the bus driver continue without me and drive me to school herself, providing adequate preparation time. I sat at the dining table eating breakfast in my sleepwear around 6:50 when we heard the bus arrive about 10 minutes earlier than usual. My mother peered outside into the foggy morning and waved the bus onward. She closed the door and returned inside, but the bus remained stationary. A knock interrupted us. My mother opened the door to find a man wearing a bus driver uniform. He explained being a substitute driver because our regular driver had called in sick. He mentioned arriving early since he wanted an early start on an unfamiliar route. Mom explained her plan to drive me to school due to our late start. He became visibly agitated and insisted he could wait several minutes since he was running ahead of schedule. My mother firmly stated I wouldn't be ready within a few minutes and told him to proceed without me. He appeared angry about this response but turned around, returned to his bus, and departed. I continued eating breakfast, still wearing pajamas. At exactly 7 a.m., another bus arrived at our house. Mom found this strange and went outside to speak with them. She returned looking terrified but remained silent about the encounter, simply telling me to finish preparing for school. At the time, I didn't understand what occurred, but years later my mother revealed the full story. When she approached the second bus, she discovered our regular driver operating it, filled with all the usual children from our route. The previous bus had been completely empty. Mom asked the driver about the substitute and him calling in sick. I never called in sick. There is no substitute driver assigned to my route, he responded. The driver immediately contacted dispatch in panic and advised my mother to go inside, call police, and report this incident, which she did without my knowledge. There was absolutely no authorized driver covering my route that day. Whoever this individual was likely represented a kidnapper who had specifically targeted me. I never heard follow-up information about this incident, not even whether someone else had been picked up by this mysterious fake bus driver. The chances are high that if I had boarded that bus, I would never have reached school or returned home safely. If Mom hadn't overslept on that specific morning, I would have been on that bus. I posted this story on r/backwoodscreepy previously using this throwaway account. My wife suggested this community might find it equally interesting. Here's the account. I grew up in Ohio during the 1970s, and my childhood friend Joe and I spent every possible moment outdoors. Joe's family owned a farm bordering an extensive forest, and my parents would drop me off mornings where we'd remain in the wilderness all weekend, only emerging for school. We loved role-playing as frontier explorers, constructing shelters, building traps, and practicing firemaking with wooden sticks, the complete wilderness experience. When we reached high school age, we developed this idea to recreate Stand By Me, based on the recently released movie. Our plan involved walking railroad tracks through countryside areas, but instead of searching for a deceased body, we'd discover excellent fishing bridges and camp near the tracks. Obviously, we understood this was dangerous and likely involved trespassing, but we were young adventurers. We had incredible experiences discovering beautiful rivers and finding bridges nobody else visited. We fished successfully, hid from passing trains, and at night camped close to the tracks, making small concealed fires. Nothing negative ever occurred. It was absolutely perfect. In fact, it was remarkably enjoyable. Let's start the story. Growing up, my best friend Joe and I were adventure seekers who loved exploring abandoned railroad tracks. We'd pack our gear and venture into the wilderness countless times without incident. After graduating high school, we pursued different paths but maintained our friendship, always making time to reconnect during visits home. During a memorable summer in the mid-1990s, both Joe and I happened to be visiting our hometown simultaneously. We spent our days with family and evenings either grabbing drinks downtown or sitting around Joe's backyard fire pit, reminiscing about our wilderness adventures. One evening, fueled by nostalgia and a few beers, we made an impulsive decision to recreate our classic railroad camping trip. The morning arrived, and my wife drove us to our traditional starting point just outside town. She expressed serious concerns about our middle-aged adventure plan, voicing her disapproval as she drove away. Joe suggested we explore a different direction this time for variety. Armed with our map and years of experience, I agreed to this spontaneous change. The daylight hours passed wonderfully, a perfect blend of excitement and bittersweet memories. We discovered an old railroad bridge where we paused to smoke and reflect before continuing our journey. Though we hadn't brought fishing equipment, we'd packed canned provisions and camping supplies. As evening approached, we selected a secluded camping spot surrounded by dense forest, creating a natural tunnel effect along the railroad tracks. We'd brought compact hammocks for sleeping, but first decided to scout our surroundings, a safety habit from our younger days. We'd walk the perimeter to ensure we weren't accidentally camping near someone's property. Venturing approximately 100 feet into the woods and up a gentle slope, we figured the hilltop would provide a clear view of the area. Reaching the summit, we spotted an old structure roughly 100 yards away, barely visible through the trees. Initially assuming it was an old sugar shack, we noticed no clear access road and no signs of recent activity. The building appeared completely dark and silent, showing no movement or artificial lighting. Curiosity compelled us to investigate closer. Moving cautiously down the hillside, we realized this wasn't any ordinary abandoned building. Before us stood a decrepit church, clearly abandoned for decades. The wooden exterior had turned nearly black from years of moss growth and natural decay. A weathered cross still crowned the building, also darkened by time and elements. The windows were completely missing their glass panes, and the doorways stood open without doors. Peering inside, we could make out rows of old pews and a raised platform where a preacher once stood. We decided against entering, seeing no evidence of recent human presence, no footpaths, tire tracks or footprints anywhere around the structure. This discovery unsettled us both, so we quickly retreated up the hill to our chosen campsite. Having the hillside between us and the abandoned church provided some psychological comfort, though we remained uneasy. We attributed our nervousness to the naturally eerie atmosphere of discovering a forgotten church deep in the wilderness. Dusk settled in, and we decided to set up our hammocks and rest until early morning. As darkness enveloped our campsite and we lay in our suspended beds chatting, we began hearing something unusual coming from the church's direction. "Do you hear that?" one of us whispered. "What is that sound?" came the response. It distinctly sounded like human voices singing in harmony. We immediately slipped out of our hammocks and crouched low, straining to identify the source of these mysterious sounds. For several minutes we listened as the singing continued at a consistent volume. Finally, we decided to carefully return to our hilltop observation point to investigate this phenomenon. Our years of wilderness experience had taught us to move silently through forests. It was instinctive. The moon provided minimal illumination, just enough to avoid walking into trees, but visibility remained extremely limited. We avoided flashlights as we crept slowly uphill, maintaining complete silence. From the hilltop, we observed light emanating from the church structure, accompanied by the singing voices we'd heard. Joe and I huddled together for a whispered conversation, both amazed by this unexpected development. The light flickered like candle flames, and despite our efforts, we couldn't understand the words being sung. It resembled church music, but in an unfamiliar language. We observed for an extended period, trying to identify who might be inside the building. Occasionally we glimpsed moving shadows, but nothing more. We had absolutely no intention of getting closer. Maintaining our football field distance felt essential for safety. The singing eventually ceased, replaced by a powerful male voice chanting. This voice absolutely terrified me. It resembled an Old Testament preacher from horror films, but again in an incomprehensible language. The pattern developed into a call-and-response format. The male voice would speak, followed by multiple voices singing in reply. This continued for some time before all voices joined together in an extended haunting wail that grew increasingly loud and disturbing. The sound became so overwhelming that I covered my ears. Then suddenly, complete silence. I was about to suggest we leave immediately when Joe grabbed my shoulder and hissed, "They're coming out." Our distance prevented clear identification, but we could see a line of figures emerging from the doorway, holding hands in single file. Some carried flashlights, and they began singing again as the lights started moving toward our hill. We ran back to our campsite, grabbed our belongings, and sprinted to the railroad tracks. Once there, we ran along the rails in the direction we'd originally come from. After running for several minutes, we stopped and looked back to see lights moving erratically down the hillside, as if the holders were shaking them. We continued alternating between running and fast walking until we no longer saw any pursuing lights. Eventually we reached a road that our map indicated led to a small town about 15 minutes away. We walked there, found a 24-hour gas station, and called my wife for pickup. My wife and friends dismissed our experience as probably just kids playing pranks, but I heard those voices. They definitely didn't sound like children. I'm still uncertain about the identity of those people, but it remains the most terrifying wilderness experience I've ever had. Around 2000 or 2001, I was driving alone from Colorado after visiting my mother, returning to Arizona. My station wagon contained a desk my mother had given me, a family heirloom from my grandfather. I'd always harbored fears about nighttime driving, specifically the paranoid thought that someone might be hiding in my back seat. This fear likely stemmed from watching too many horror movies or absorbing my mother's anxieties. She'd constantly warn me about sleeping at rest stops or gas stations, insisting that someone would kidnap and murder me. Despite these warnings, I preferred avoiding the hassle and expense of motels. I was driving through an empty highway stretch late at night with no other traffic visible when a red truck appeared behind me, flashing its headlights and honking persistently. My initial thought was that something was wrong with my vehicle, possibly related to the desk in my hatchback. Why else would someone be so insistent about getting my attention? I pulled over to the shoulder. Being in my mid-20s and somewhat naive, I got out of my car. The red truck positioned itself directly behind me, continuing to flash its lights and honk its horn. As I stepped out, planning to walk to my car's rear to investigate potential problems, a disturbing realization hit me. Why was he still honking when I was already out of my vehicle? That seemed very odd. Then he got out of his truck. Immediately, I knew something was seriously wrong. I jumped back into my car and sped away. The next exit was approximately 45 miles ahead. He followed me the entire distance. I took the first available exit and drove to a busy grocery store with an adjacent laundromat. An ambulance was parked at the laundromat with its emergency lights flashing, and I positioned my car next to it. I reasoned that if there was an ambulance present, police officers would likely arrive eventually. The man remained in his truck in the grocery store parking lot, watching me continuously. I was absolutely terrified and refused to leave my car, feeling foolish about explaining my situation to anyone. I waited approximately 1 hour before he finally departed. Even after he left, I waited additional time before continuing my journey to Arizona, remaining paranoid and vigilant for any red trucks throughout the remainder of my drive. Fast forward 5 to 6 years later, I was watching Unsolved Mysteries or a similar crime show with my boyfriend at the time. He knew about my highway experience since we were dating when it occurred. A story appeared about a man operating on that exact same highway stretch, using a red truck and those identical tactics to force women to pull over before murdering them. I'm incredibly grateful that my instincts warned me something was wrong and that I got back in my car and drove away immediately. That split-second decision likely saved my life from becoming another victim of a highway serial killer. And that's where the nightmare truly began. From the false bus driver to the abandoned church, these encounters prove that darkness hides in plain sight, waiting for the right moment. Some call them coincidences, but here at Midnight Confessions, we know they're warnings etched into reality. The question is, are you brave enough to listen? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more chilling true horror stories.